All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We will get started. It is Monday, July 8th, 2024. It is just after 5:30 p.m., and this is a public meeting of the School Board of West Bend Joint School District Number 1. More than 24 hours prior to the meeting, notice of the time, place, date, and subject matter of this meeting was posted at the entrance doors of the Education Service Center and also on the district website. It was also sent to the West Bend Community Memorial Library, the Daily News, WRYU, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and other media sources that have requested notice of our meetings. Superintendent Wimmer, could you confirm for us that this meeting was properly posted?
Yes, it was.
Great. Thank you. Please rise and join the board in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We recognize the quorum of our board with all 7 members present tonight. Next on our agenda is the approval of the agenda, which was posted in advance. I would move to approve this agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kelly. We have a motion and second to approve the agenda. Any final discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries, and we have an approved agenda. We move to our recognition item tonight, and we have a recognition for state for West Boys Track and Field. I believe we have a guest here, and Aaron Felber, our West Athletic Director, is going to introduce him. Good evening.
Hello. Thank you so much for having us. It's exciting to honor Cam McAndrews. He graduated a few weeks ago, but I say once a Spartan, always a Spartan. He gets to come back and get some recognition. So let's call up Coach Mike Herther and Cam McAndrews.
Thanks, Ms. Felber. I just want to thank the board, first off, for just being such an integrated part to our school district, whether it's teaching, working with these kids' athletics. We see you guys out in the community. You're supporting. You're always there. It's one of the best things about being a coach and a teacher here in the community is just the jointness that it provides. So, speaking about special, I've got to speak about Cam McAndrews a lot this year, whether it was going to college in front of other coaches, to go and get North Shore Conference Athlete of the Year awards, at banquets to family, friends, and just I've been able to talk about athletic ability, character, determination, work ethic, and being the final time that I get to talk about him, I could go over all the highlights, stuff like that, but I kind of just want to go and pretty much make this a thank you from me, my coaching staff, my community, our program here. Cam is just, he teaches new kids. He's come, met expectations, joined a sport, gone to state 2 years, and when you look at it, it's reinvigorating to me as a coach, to other athletes to want to go and do what Cam does, just through his work ethic, his attitude, how he displays and carries himself. So even though he is leaving us, and it's been a month, and I've kind of had like the withdrawal taken away from it, it's good to see him again. I know he's going to do really well next year, and I just want to tell him thank you for all 4 years that I've known you. It's been a pleasure to see you through the school. All the congrats go to you, and the best of luck going forward. So thank you.
Well, Cameron, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I just have to ask, because I see it's high jump and long jump were your 2 state qualifying events. So how far or high did you jump for each of those?
6'5" for high jump is my highest, and 22.6 and a half for long jump.
6'5" on the high jump. I'm just repeating for those on the who are watching remotely. And you said 22 and a half? 22.6 and a half. That's impressive. And you're off to college?
Yeah.
Where are you headed to college?
Oshkosh.
Oshkosh. We wish you all the best. And based on all the words that your coach has said, it's just amazing how you've grown. This is how we hope all young adults are as they begin their adulthood. So thank you so much for coming and for doing us proud. There are probably other places you'd want to be on a July night in between, your graduating year and college. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. And we invite all of our guests always to stay for the meeting because it's a public meeting, but we also understand you may have other things to do. So we're not offended if you decide to do other things. Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We move next to public participation. I don't have any public participation comment cards, and I'm looking, I don't see any, and so we will move then to our next agenda item, which is our consent agenda. And tonight on our consent agenda, we have several items. The minutes of the June 17th, 2024 regular board meeting. We have a number of contracts, 3 of them. We have 2 resignations, no retirements. Carryover requests for unobligated basic Head Start grant funds. An authorization related to the stop-loss insurance policy. And then we have a number of policy series items. And correct me if I'm wrong, Superintendent Wimmer, but these are cases where there are no language changes to the policy. We're merely noting that the review date was updated, so there are no changes.
Correct. In both the 400 and 500 series, it would just be a date to reflect that they were formally reviewed. No changes or revisions to these at all.
Great, thank you. So that would include the policy series review, the 400 series students for second reading. I have to page forward a little bit, as well as a policy series review of 500 personnel for second reading. And disbursements posted through July 8th of 2024. I believe that concludes the consent agenda. So a number of items on the consent agenda. I'll pause to see if there are any questions on any of the items. All right, hearing none, I'd move to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Melanie. We have a motion and second to approve the consent agenda. Any final discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries as well. That takes us then to reports. And first, we start with our annual nursing report. And I believe Amy Brager is going to be joining us, if that's correct. Excellent. She makes her way to the podium. And Amy, you are one of our district nurses, is that correct?
I am.
Excellent. Look
Hi,
forward to your
everyone.
report.
Thank you. So my name is Amy Brager. I am the district nurse, and I just completed my 8th year here in that role. Prior to and alongside that, I had worked here part-time for 2 years as a support nurse, and then worked at Children's Wisconsin as a pediatric nurse for 8 years in the ICU, so I specialized in trauma, or pediatric trauma. I am also a board of director on the Wisconsin Association of School Nurses, and I'm a proud West Bend School District parent. I have 3 boys. Pictured up there is my mighty middle, as I like to call him. He is going to be joining us for 4K this school year. And then just above him is my oldest. He is going into 1st grade at Fair Park. And I wanted this picture for you all to see that he is actually reading a book. He is reading to his younger sibling, which could not have happened without the amazing staff at Fair Park and the wonderful support that you all provide them. So I just want to thank you all for helping my own family to learn and grow here. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about what our health professionals and I have done this school year as far as projects goes, and then some of the data that we have pulled regarding our student population. So pictured here is our wonderful team. These are our health room professionals, and then broken down here is what their licensures and certifications are and kind of where they're listed and spread out throughout the district. We serve a variety of students and a variety of medical conditions here in the district. We have students that have more complex procedures like urinary catheterizations or G-tube feedings, some more intensive monitoring, but we also, I like to put the reports up of some of our more common things that we see during the school day, and some of the things that we have a lot of management with. So we'll start with our students with type 1 diabetes. We have 15 students in the district. While that doesn't seem like a huge number, I'll just remind you that some of these students might come to the clinic several times a day. So these students, we kind of meet them wherever they are at in their journey. Some of them are just being diagnosed, and some of them have been living with this diagnosis for several years. So we work towards independence and self-care as soon as we can, but obviously with age-appropriate intervention. We do a lot of training with the staff that works directly with them and closely with them on insulin administration, carb counting, and other types of management to keep them safe at school. And we do a lot of communication with their families as well. So That's our students with diabetes. Students with asthma, we have 477 this year, which is up about 20 or so. And then with that comes inhalers, right? So management of all the inhalers and administration of that throughout their school day. Emergency medications are up 40 from last year at 208. So that doesn't include the inhalers that we talked about, but it is mostly encompassing of EpiPens. We have 140 EpiPens, which are used for students that have life-threatening allergies. We also have about 53 students with diazepam that is used for students with seizure disorders, and then a smattering of other emergency medications like Solumedrol injections. Number of medications in clinics, I chose to represent this number a little bit differently this year. I tried in the past to give you like doses administered, but Skyward doesn't really do an awesome job at pulling out healthcare data sometimes, so we weren't getting super accurate numbers with that. This is a little bit more accurate in regards to this is how many medications we have daily so that children can that can be administered, so 1,210 medications in our clinics. The last number here is the number of students that are diagnosed with a mental health or behavioral health disorder. So that is a diagnosis. We know there are more students that have symptoms of or that don't have access to a provider or don't see a provider regularly, but 16% of our students have a diagnosis and are being treated for that. That is an increase from last year. We were at 10% last year, and that doesn't surprise me given that we have also seen a huge increase in our clinic visits. So you'll see there that our total is 72,437 visits to the clinic last school year. That is up from last school year, which was about 67,000. And that is the highest I've ever seen it. When I started in 2016, it was around 53,000. We kind of went down into the 40s and back up into the 50s, but since 2021, we've been on a steady increase, and this is the first time we've gotten into the 70s. So there's a breakdown there. Silverbrook has always been our highest number. My guess is due to the age population there, which I could go into a lot more information later, but that is and always has been our highest, followed by the high school, and then Badger, and then Green Tree and McLean have usually fought it out for the number one spot in the elementary schools. But just for reference, Jackson, Silverbrook, and the high school actually decreased from last year on this list. The rest have increased quite a bit. Students sent home due to illness, 5,040. So what that means is students that are coming into the clinic and they are presenting either with obvious illness or they're meeting some criteria from the state that says they have to go home. So that's based off of that criteria or the assessment of the nurse. And calls to 911 went down by 6 from last year, so we were at 12 this year. And then students treated and returned to class is my favorite number to tell you, 62,109. So of that 72,000 something students, we had 62,109 encounters where they were able to come in, get the intervention they needed from the health room professional, and really speaks to the work that our health room professionals do every day to get those kids back into class and ready to learn. Some of our school-based health initiatives and community partnerships. In addition to serving on a variety of committees in the community and panels, we maintained our district immunization compliance rate at 99.9%. We partnered with Bridging Brighter Smiles dental program to provide charitable care for students in the district. We have our medication training and our clinical experiences that we always do every year. Our staff we have 2 certified CPR instructors on our team, Jamie and Jessica, who were able to provide CPR certification to 90 plus staff members. That was particularly important this year because that is a criteria for becoming a heart-safe school through Project Adam, and we were up for reaccreditation this year. So that has to happen every 3 years, and we were able to successfully complete that for every building and every team this school year. So super proud of all of our emergency medical response teams. They all received their Heart Safe School accreditations. And they've done such an amazing job in the last few years that they've really gained the attention of the Project Adam community, and have been I've been asked to speak on panels of how do we get this started in school districts. We've been recognized nationally in different presentations across the country, and this year you might see that middle picture there. Children's Wisconsin actually reached out and asked us to be part of a social media campaign where they featured a school that was doing a cardiac arrest drill in their school building. So I don't know if you can see the fine print on there, but that is the second day that was posted, and it says 73,000 views. So that was the first time I've ever been part of a video that's gone viral. So I was pretty proud of that. But the teams did a great job, and what was really cool about being a part of a project like that is seeing the comments, seeing how many people were resharing it, and tagging building administrators or school nurses that they knew and saying, hey, you should really get this in your program. It looks like the staff really comes together well. And there were even a few parents on there that said, yeah, my child had a cardiac arrest at school and was saved by the team. So it's really great to see this out there. So that was a really cool project to be a part of. We also, on that note, utilized our DHS grant funding to replace 16 of our AEDs in our buildings that needed it. We did a lot of research on which ones were a good fit and developed replacement schedules and provided training for all of our emergency response teams. We completed vision screenings in collaboration with the West Bend Lions Club. We always have done our kindergarten students in those screenings, but a couple years ago we learned that the eye kind of changes in 4th grade. So we started expanding to 5th grade students, and it's a good thing we did because we have found in both grades that we see about a 13% referral rate. So 13% of the students that we're screening need glasses. So we're able to get them connected with eye care providers and glasses if they need them. Okay, so then the next year, the goals that we have for next year are to continue those project-based work continue the project-based work that targets improved physical and mental health of our students and staff. We will collaborate with our student services team to strengthen that comprehensive mental health framework. We'll continue to expand those vision screenings to the higher grade levels, and I will be serving my 2nd term on the board of directors for the Wisconsin Association of School Nurses. On that board, I have about 39 school districts in the immediate area surrounding us, and about 70 school nurses that are under my directorship. And so my first term was a great opportunity to just listen and learn from and understand the different things that we're doing really well in our region of the state and some of the things that we need to improve upon. So it's been a really great opportunity to now to be reelected into a 2nd term so that we can do some program building and implementation. The last thing I wanted to point out, that picture was taken last week in Chicago at the National Association of School Nurses conference. That was the first time I've ever gotten to go to a national conference, being that it was just next door. But what you see in the picture there are all of the Wisconsin school nurses that were able to go to the conference. And right in the middle is Louise Wilson. She's holding an award. She is our state consultant through DPI. She's also on the board of directors for WASN, and she is accepting a fellowship in that picture. So she has been inducted as a fellow, which is the highest honor you can receive in the national level of school nursing. So this tells me that we are in really good hands in the state of Wisconsin, and then also just how proud I am that I get to serve on a leadership level with someone that's being recognized nationally. And I hope to bring those things back to our community here to help to really bring the best and safest practices to our students and families. So I appreciate all of you being able to listen in, and I will take any questions if you have them.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for your report. I think it's a really great snapshot of the services that are provided and the usage. I've got a couple of questions, but I'm first just going to turn it over to my fellow board members to see if anyone's got a question or two. Dr. Temez.
Just a curiosity, your numbers, you have 62,000 students were treated in returner class, 5,000 were sent home. What happens with the other 5,000?
We just throw them. I'm just kidding.
They're treated and they stay in the office?
Those are parent chooses to pick up. So they might.
They weren't sent home, they just
Correct. So
had the option to get picked
yep,
up.
it's
I was just
coded a
curious
little
what
differently.
happens.
So if they meet the criteria that is like DPI, state, DHS, all of that to be sent home because they have to be, they have one of
Okay.
those on those guidelines, then that's included in that number. If it's like we call parent and parent says, no, I'm just going to come get them if they're not feeling well.
Okay.
Then
Perfect.
they're,
Thank you.
yeah.
Other questions? I just one question on the statistics. It is interesting, you talk about 72,000 plus encounters or dispositions, and we talk about declining enrollment in the district, and so it's interesting that those are kind of going in opposite ways. And so I don't want you to speculate, but have you thought about what needs are up?
Yeah, I mean, quite honestly, we see an increase in the mental health and behavioral health diagnoses as well. I haven't had the opportunity to do a lot of research on this, but if I had to have an educated guess, I have to say it's probably related to stress. And a lot of children will come to the clinic with somatic symptoms, so they have anxiety, or they're worried about a test, or they're worried about something socially happening, and they have what they think is a stomach ache or a headache or what have you related to that. Come to find out, we find a pattern. Or they're trying to avoid a certain space, and it becomes a physical ailment that they're having. So not always, but I do think that a lot of times we see an increase whenever we see an increase in reported mental health and behavioral health as well.
And the other question that I have is, as it relates to taking medications, for instance, you talked about asthma. So if you have a second grader with asthma and an inhaler, my guess is that needs to be done under some sort of supervision, the
Yes.
use of that. But what about a high school senior? Is that
So
something?
the state of Wisconsin does have a state statute that they can self-carry an inhaler if a provider says they are allowed to. So that's on our medication authorization form. So most of our students that are over the age of 7th grade are going to carry their own inhalers. Below that is kind of up to the family and the provider. So we'll have a conversation if we see a medication card come in for a kindergartner that has that box checked, like, yep, they can carry it on their own. We're like, can they really though? Let's have some conversations about that, because we don't know, we need to make sure that they're utilizing it appropriately. So are there times that we see younger kiddos that will whip out an inhaler and take 8 puffs on it? Yes, but then we have that opportunity to reach out to that family. It becomes a partnership with the teacher as well to say, like, hey, if you see this, we have to make sure that we're using appropriately too.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions?
How do you feel you're staffed?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, you saw the clinic dispositions, right? They're going up. Silverbrook is always one of those places that can use as many nurses as we can. So it's one of those things that if we had more people, that would be awesome. We are working with what we have, but Silverbrook has always been, if we have an extra person on support or something like that, we send them there. Sometimes it is still a very busy workday over at Silverbrook. They have, like I said, that level or that number decreased actually surprised me, because every time I've been there, there are 2 or 3 nurses that are working, or health room professionals that are working, and it's still a pretty busy workload.
Well, I would think that would be one of the benefits of the, possible consolidation talks that we're talking about, right? I mean, the amount of support staff that we have might not change, and now you guys will be more condensed into pockets where the needs are. So that'd be nice.
Other questions? We appreciate your report.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming tonight. And Superintendent Wimmer, the superintendent's report is next on the agenda.
Just a couple updates. A reminder, this is our last week of summer school. We've had hundreds of students participate in grades kindergarten through grade 7. Our high school classes will continue. They end the week of July 19th or August 2nd, depending on the class and the credits that you're taking there. In August, there are several Jumpstart events for students going into kindergarten, 5th, 7th grades. And there are also band and orchestra camps at Silverbrook. So I'd encourage everyone to check our website for those additional opportunities yet to come this summer. Registration is coming up for the following year, so if you're already enrolled and you're not brand new to our district, you still are asked to register annually. So it's a time where we update records, review important things like handbooks, and make sure we have the most up-to-date information. Also, it routes you for busing and gets all that piece going. So that'll be launched next week to families, so we'll send out notices to alert them to that opportunity too. And congratulations to 4 West Bend East and West students who earned Skill Point certificates for their performance at the Skills USA Nationals in late June. Skill Point certificates are only awarded to students who met a predetermined threshold score in the Skills USA event, showing workplace readiness. So the following students earned their certificate for video news production: Trainer Giron, Bridget Kiefer, Jose Rodriguez, and Grayson DeGroot. So congratulations to those students, and thank you for representing West Bend on a national level. That concludes my report.
Great. Any questions for Superintendent Wimmer? Thank you for your report. All right, we move then to discussion items. And our first discussion item is a continuation of some work we've done between Policy Committee and, of course, Curriculum Committee, recommendations for book club selection and notification regarding sexual content. And Superintendent Wimmer, I wasn't sure if you were kicking this off tonight?
Dr. Trueblood and I can kick this off. So she had done the work on the side of the Curriculum Committee and can certainly speak to some of that work. But then we, in turn, after our last discussion, picked it up in Policy Committee. So what you saw new in the documents was the Policy Committee's work. We talked about it at our last board meeting, just foreshadowing what we reviewed, whether it was the statute, the FCC guidelines, some of the work from the Curriculum Committee, to look at how can we lend clarity to a definition. So you'll see that work below. So that top work was the work of the Curriculum Committee, and that below work was some contributions by the Policy Committee so that the board can further define. That was one of the concerns, I think, by everyone, that we needed to have some clarity around what we meant, what we didn't mean, so that we could then follow through. So it's really coming back to the board for discussion on helping to set those definitions.
So just to kind of kick off the dialogue here, I think I try to think of this as a little bit of a flow chart of how we kind of go through the review of curricular materials. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we start with, first of all, and it's maybe not even on this page, but we start with if there's a piece of literature or book that we're thinking about, but it really just has no educational value, it's a technical manual. I mean, there's no reason really for it to be in the curriculum, then it doesn't make it at all. Right, but then if it gets through the next one, we look to see, well, could there be some content in here that could be defined as sexual content? And so the question is, well, what is that, right? Because we have cases where in literature you have, someone kisses someone else on the cheek. Well, is that sexual content? How do you put that into words? And so Mr. Donaldson talked about, well, perhaps what we could do is take a look at the definition that's used in Wisconsin statutes for actually, this is a criminal statute, but kind of gets us around, well, how do you even know what qualifies, for instance, as something like that? And so that's, I think, where this language came from. So that's a little bit of a background. But if we walk through and say, well, if it meets the definition that it is an explicit and detailed description or narrative account of, and then you see the bullet points there, that taken as a whole predominantly appeals to the prurient, shameful, or morbid interests of children, chances are it's not going to make it past Policy Committee. But Curriculum Committee. Thank you, June, for correcting me. I appreciate that. But
none of the committees are going to approve it.
It's just not happening, right? But that last language, that taken as a whole predominantly appeals to the prurient, shameful, or morbid interests of children, I studied that for a bit and I thought, okay, I think the reason that's in there is because, for instance, that's what makes things like the human growth and development curriculum not qualify. In other words, not be prohibited, because that's not designed to predominantly appeal to the prurient, shameful, or morbid interests of children. So the point is, it's got to tick all these boxes really to be considered sexual content. And so just wanted to bring that up to the board. That's really how the statute was designed. I don't know, John, I think you had looked at this too. I'm just curious if you see it the same way. It's kind of, we talk in law school about statutes having elements, kind of the recipe, how to bake the cake, and that's what it's got. It's got these points that you kind of tick off to say, well, here's how you define it if it meets these criteria. I'm just curious if your thoughts, I know you've given this some additional thought as well. That was kind of my thought from a background perspective on this. Anything to share, or?
I guess, yeah, I mean, I agree, there's different levels of how to process the effectiveness of the books or what we're reading or what we're giving the kids and how to determine if it's appropriate or not. But the one thing that I did see that I still don't agree with is in the recommendations for book club selection, there still is, I mean, if you go down, it says current grade bands, none, thresholds, none, but then it goes and talks about elementary grade, none, middle level grades, limited, secondary grades, some. I still disagree. I think there should still be none for all of them, so.
Well, and I think we can bring that up as a point. I think what we're trying to do, that's a good point. I think our first focus is to try to come up with a definition, but Superintendent, maybe we can take that as a takeaway item as well. Other questions, I guess, on, we're not taking action on this tonight, but just curious, we're trying to put this into words. It's one of these things that's hard to describe. But these would be the criteria to be used as to whether or not, well, does it fall down the path of, well, this could be viewed as sexual content, which has to go through additional steps, or if it's, no, it's not even considered sexual content, it doesn't meet this definition, and so it would proceed down a different path. Mr. Jenkins.
Hey. Quinn, I know you and I emailed a little bit today, and I guess I'm just curious, when I look at the agenda packet today versus when I looked at it 3 hours ago, I feel like it's missing an attachment. Wasn't there a separate attachment that had examples of books?
There was a limited attachment that had one that would have actually not qualified
Okay.
under it. So it was removed due to an error.
Gotcha. Okay. And then, so then I actually asked you to expand upon that, and then you did, right? You sent back just 3 titles to look at. And I guess for me, because again, I try to feel like I'm pretty neutral here as far as this topic, I would like to just see more examples of the specific content, what a high editorial level, this is what the book is about. These are some of the things that might set off some alarms, right? And then putting it through this filter, this is what we'd accept and what we wouldn't. And so seeing more examples like that, I think would help me at least to formulate my opinion.
Certainly. So we, in the review, they, kind of perused lots of books, and we've been, watching media in other districts and things like that. So we do have that list. But for us to apply a filter that wasn't discussed or talked about, we didn't want to put the cart before the horse and presuppose things. So if the board was in a place to give us that clarity in those pieces, then we could say, okay, looking now through this lens, here's what that would look like, and give you some samples. I mean, I can give you some of those passages, and you could use those for discussion purposes if that's what the board would like. But, is that now, or is that, to help you create the definition, or do you want to kind of create the definition first and see what falls within? How would you like to proceed?
So I agree with that method, and I just want to point out, though, in my email response that I got back from Quinn back on June 25th, this stated that July 8th meeting was going to have that compilation of all those books. So that's what I've been waiting for. And so to come to this meeting and not see that, I guess I'm just a little confused, disappointed, and I just want to make sure that I have those examples in order to apply this definition. But all that being said, I agree. I'd rather have the definition figured out first.
We certainly
and then
have
apply those examples.
Sure.
a list of just some content for you of books that are or aren't in play, that are just samples of. If that's helpful for you to define something, we can certainly attach that. We could look at that. It just depends on how you'd like to proceed with your discussion, or if you want to try and narrow that definition a little bit and have us try and apply that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't see a problem with if we focus on the definition and then kind of do a little bit of a back test. I think that's what you're talking about before approval. I think that's what you're thinking about.
Yep, yep.
I don't think that's a problem. If we start with the words, and I realize this is something that's a little bit tough to define, but is there something here that we say, boy, that really doesn't make sense, or there's an error or something of the sort? Would a next step then, Superintendent Wimmer, be, all right, if we say this is, we're not taking action, so we're not going to say that we're adopting this yet, but to say here are some examples, some book passages where we are going to apply this and see.
So we have that, and we could go through that. What we're looking for is kind of that nexus between the curriculum committee's work and the policy committee's review to see where the board falls, so we can apply that language. So we need something to apply to proceed. So where do you want us to land between the curriculum committee recommendation and a little bit of that expansion with policy? Where would you like to land as a board?
Let me say where to land, as in which language would we
Are
like
there
to gravitate
elements from the
toward?
policy committee discussion you want us to include in how we frame that and filter that? Or do you want us to go with how we would test and use the curriculum committee recommendation? Again, we were looking for the intersection of the statute. How would you like us to proceed?
I was just going to ask, it looks like what the curriculum committee had originally had is pretty well included in the policy committee discussion. It just adds a little bit more detail. And I'm okay with that. I feel like that's fine to just kind of make it a little more specific, maybe.
Okay, helpful. Other thoughts? And again, we're not taking action on this. Are there objections to proceeding with to have the policy committee usurp all of the good thought that the curriculum committee put into, and work put into their definition? But if the thought is that if the policy committee one is a little bit more precise or specific, that we use that standard to try, and again, we'll have an opportunity before we take action, but would the board be comfortable moving in that direction? Excuse me.
What we could do, given that, we can send out before that next board meeting or discussion, again, knowing this is not an action item, we can send you that list and everyone could kind of interpret that and send that in. We would do our work as well and interpret it. Again, these are just samples that are in books that may or may not be in use in our district. It's just samples of sexual content for the purpose of applying a definition. So why don't I get that out to the board sooner rather than later, so you can do that in the interim, as we would do that in the interim, and then have a discussion around, because that might help us frame like, oh, everyone was completely solid on this. Everyone thought the same exact thing, so that's helping us test the definition and then highlight, this is where we have disagreement, this is the meat of this discussion, kind of thing. I think that might help as we narrow it and then can apply it and everyone look through that lens and see how they would interpret and then go from there in that piece. Is that?
I think that would be a good exercise, because even with more words, we're still, as 7 of us, I would imagine, are going to have some disagreements sometime on, I don't know if that would be in or out, but it would be a good
too,
exercise.
Maybe instead of putting the board on the spot, now it gives you an opportunity to kind of weigh that and kind of, like you said, where does that fall, where does it meet, so that we can find that intersection. And we've even got, because June 22nd is a work session, we've got some August time, we've got an August policy committee as well. I can't recall the date that the curriculum committee's meeting in August, but it might be able to.
August 20, looks like.
Yeah, okay, so that would be a little bit later. We'd still have a full board discussion before then, but we can certainly kind of bring it up. But I would ask everyone to do that work, that homework over the next couple of weeks as individuals and send it in to us so that we can kind of put that together.
I don't have a problem continuing the discussion at a regular board meeting. Unless the board feels like this is worthy of a separate work session. We'll otherwise, unless there are objections, we'll continue it as a part of our board meeting.
I think it'll be really efficient too, again, if we give you that little bit of individual homework and we synthesize that and we come to the table with that synthesis ready, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, we have our next steps. Other discussion? All right, homework to be received. Thank you. Our next agenda item then is facilities planning, energy efficiency, and capital maintenance. And Mr. Tim Harder is coming forward to the podium, our Director of Facilities and Technology, to walk us through this item. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, everybody. Just let me get set up here. All right, so this evening I want to talk about two items with the board as a follow-up to our June 22nd board work session where we talked about phase one of a potential referendum and a project that could go forward. As part of that, we are at the process in our journey around facility study where working with our team here, we kind of put together this graphic a little bit around where are we at? And for us to come back on the next board meeting or board work session, really we're trying to refine that scope for the board. And so this graphic kind of shows you some of the work that we've already done for you in the community around the facility study, some of the master planning, looking at a variety of different assessments of our buildings, both on the operational side and the educational side. But really what we're trying to do is refine that scope to get those dollars as close as possible for you at our next board meeting. And so with that tonight, we have a couple of things that we brought back after our last board meeting. The first would be a conversation around energy efficiency options and looking for some guidance from the board this evening around that and what we could potentially look at and could not. It is not a, yes, we are going with this today. It is not, we're not asking for action item on it. It is more of a, should we go down this path or not? And we'll provide some options there. And then the second was around the additional capital maintenance pieces that were discussed at our last work session. So when we talk about a new building in Jackson, and we start to refine that scope, as a district, we have the option to look at some different energy efficiency options. And so often you hear a variety of different things that come up, but typically our two biggest utility users here are heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, and lights. And so the one thing that the assumption that I can share with you is any new building that we would put up, any renovation that we would do, we're already looking at the LED piece here. If you recall back to our last capital maintenance project, we were actually working on retrofitting 3 of our buildings in-house to as much LED lighting as we can at that point in time. As we look at some of the energy efficiency options, really what we're looking for and the potential to explore further is that return on investment. Will this pay off down the road? What is that return rate? When will we receive the return on that investment? Because often there might be some initial costs up front that go with it. So working with our partners at EUA and at Findorf, there are some options that we have that we can look at. And so one of them is a geothermal heating and cooling system. One of them is looking at solar power that could be both electricity and or water heating. A traditional HVAC system with some energy efficiency options, an ice storage system and an air source heat pump, or just go with a traditional HVAC system. So the first one that I have some background info for you on is a geothermal system. And the way a geothermal system does is it transfers heat and cold from the ground and utilizes that to cool or heat a building depending upon the time of the year. If you were to go on a geothermal site, they drill deep wells or larger fields with piping, and that's what transfers your heat or cool back into the building. There are some pros and some cons to each of these systems we could consider. The first being that return on investment through reduced utility costs over the years. What they call the bore field, that is the space on the Jackson property where they would be drilling these deep wells where the pipes would go down, can last 50 plus years. It does have redundancy built into the system, and it often delivers 3 to 4 times more energy than consumed. So it can help run the whole building at that point in time. And these systems have the ability to be coupled with other systems that we might utilize within our building. And one of the pieces that you will see throughout this presentation and things we have talked about before is we would look to, if the board provides guidance, look into additional opportunities for us to receive grant dollars such as Focus on Energy. Another one is the Inflation Reduction Act, which has money specifically for tax exempt entities around energy and so forth at that point. The cons of a geothermal system, the initial cost is higher. So there is a front-end investment in all of these energy efficiency options. So that's why we always look at that return on investment. There is a potential for higher maintenance costs in the future just because there is more equipment than you have in a traditional HVAC setting. It would require us to have a little more reliance on outside contractors. We don't have a geothermal person in-house because we don't have a building that is on that currently. It is also not suitable for all sites and systems and places to install this. And so one of the things that you will see here is that it does require an upfront study, and I'll talk a little bit about that more here shortly when you talk about Jackson and what that could look like. So if we were to consider this, the example here is from a K-12 school in Wisconsin provided for our partner. Currently, they are seeing 9 cents per square foot annually in a reduction in their utility costs. So that is all based upon the size of your building and so forth. So that's based off the last year at a school in Wisconsin. We would have the ability to use grant dollars that we could go look for, such as Focus on Energy, the Inflation Reduction Act, and in some cases, districts are currently seeing a 25% or higher return on those grant dollars. Sometimes the grant dollars come up front for the project, sometimes they are in the form of a rebate check. So the easiest example of that is Focus on Energy. We get a rebate for that. We put in, buy all of our lights for McLean, Silverbrook, and Badger. We send in a form, it's installed, here's what the cost is, we get our rebate check at that point in time. In some cases, these systems are not appropriate for an investment without those initial grant dollars, and so that's one of the pieces we would have to delve in further. To really understand if geothermal is a fit for our system and for our location, you're looking at performing what's called a conductivity test, where they come in and they basically drill one well to see what the rock structure is, what the dirt structure is, and what the conductivity of transferring heat versus cold back and forth is. So that would be an upfront cost that we would have to come back to the board with in a contract if that's something we chose to go down that route. You would be able to use that test drill bore for your system if you went forward. So it's not like they randomly just drill a hole somewhere and then come back and do it somewhere else. And then we would continue conversations and dig into deeper about other districts who have invested in this and so forth. And we're really at that early stage of what this could look like for some different options here. So I'll go through all of them and answer any questions for you this evening. The second option that we could look at is solar panels, probably the more common one that our community is used to seeing, or some of us are seeing. A typical roof type system has a payback of 12 to 17 years. On a solar panel, that's without any sort of credits, Focus on Energy dollars, some of those grant dollars from the federal government. You do get a return on investment through reduced utility costs over the years. There's minimal maintenance costs to them. We currently have solar panels on the high school. They aren't electric. They're actually what warms our pool for us year round. So they're on the south side of that building if you come in by the athletics entrance there. Other than doing some maintaining on the plumbing and so forth that connects to it, the next biggest thing is really cleaning them. So this summer we're up for cleaning, so we'll have to go up and clean your solar panels just like you would clean your windows in your home.
But with that cleaning, I was just about to ask that, 12 to 17 years is if they were running perfectly.
Yes.
And there's no dust, there's no
Yep.
snow. So, I mean, realistically, we're probably pushing 20 years plus to gain the efficiencies back of what it costs to do solar.
So if we, John, if we went further, we would go deeper into what this would look like, the site, the location. This is, we're staying high level at this point, but you are correct. There
Especially
are
in winter
different
here,
things.
I see so many solar panels covered in snow half the winter, they're completely useless.
It's about how you set them up. I know we had similar issue at the high school prior when Dave Ross was here. They had to add some metal sheeting and so forth to handle those types of things. The con with it, there are some upfront costs. Some of that can be brought back through grants and so forth at that point in time. And it does require coordination with other aspects of the building in terms of structural capacity, what type of roofing system you put on or when you put it on, and the electrical infrastructure. Being a brand new build in this case, you have the ability to coordinate versus asking a contractor to put it on a pre-existing building. Obviously has some different dollar costs that go with that. The third option is really solar panels and water heating. So this is what I was talking about for our high school campus where we use this for heating our pool water. And that does run year round as long as they're clean and uncovered. The biggest thing that we learned through our partners already in this is this would be the lowest on our list of recommendations. There currently is a very long return on investment for the water piece. With the dollars and natural gas being currently lower and a variety of different pieces, the return on investment of these is not as high. So they would suggest that this would move lower to our list if we were to consider this as a energy efficient option for our building. The last option, outside of a traditional system, is where you do energy efficient add-ons. So the best example of this is what we call an ice making system. So if you're ever to go over to Badger Middle School here and you were to go kind of in that back parking lot here on the north side, and you look in one of our outdoor maintenance areas, there's a bunch of large tanks that work down in the ground, and they hold ice. So on a day like today, from about 10 o'clock till 6 in the morning, that system generates and creates ice in these big tanks. Tomorrow morning about 9 a.m., when it calls for cooling, we switch over from traditional using electric cooling and use that cool ice to basically generate our cool for the building throughout the day. And the reason you look at a system like this is you're trying to pay for your energy when it's cheap during your off-demand times, which is in the evening, versus during the school day or during the day when everybody is using that. So we deal with peak and off-peak times here in pricing. And if we set a new peak in our energy consumption usage, we carry that peak for us for the next 12 months at that point in time. And so that is a system that does pay off for us here. It does have some additional upfront costs and can be some additional maintenance costs. It has run fairly well for us over the last 13 years that we've had it installed at Badger. We have had an instance where it was offline for 3 weeks, and you do noticeably see a difference in your electricity costs at that point in time. And so as we look at options, those are kind of your larger options, some of the very high-level pros and cons of some of these. As every single one of these takes time, effort, potentially dollars to investigate further, we are looking feedback from the board if any of these should be investigated, none of them, one of them, et cetera, and willing to answer your questions. Really just looking for that, should we explore or should we not, or should we stay with a traditional type system?
Go ahead, John.
You're ready for questions?
Yep.
I have questions on the heat, the geothermal.
Yeah.
So geothermal obviously can't do all the heating.
Yep.
Because it can only get to roughly 56 degrees or whatever it is of the earth temperature, correct?
Yes.
So what's the secondary system that'll be used for that? And
So you still have in all of these options, it's just like the ice system at Badger. I carry a system over there that is able to cool that building. It's about the actual energy usage that you're bringing up and down. That's where your true ROI is there. Does not mean I go without a boiler in any way, shape, or form. You still have to have both systems there to cover that building in the event something were to happen.
and what is the total cost of?
For something like Badger, what they call the premium, so here's your normal install of a system, or sorry, excuse me, Jackson, here's your normal install of a system to, adding on for a geothermal, you're looking at about $500,000. Again, that's a rough dollar amount till we get in and we would actually perform that conductivity test to see what would be needed for a system like that. So there is some upfront costs you would want to study before you would make a commitment for those types of.
And do you have estimates on federal tax credits for stuff like that?
We see it up to about the 30% of that project till we get the whole project. So that's not just the premium, it's the whole HVAC project that we would get back at that point in time. But we wouldn't know that till we actually define the project and the cost with it.
Because most likely you'd have some kind of credits if you just went with a standard high efficiency
Yes.
HVAC system
Yep.
also. So
All of
I
these
just- I
systems, we
didn't
see some credits on, just
Yeah, and
certain
I-
ones have higher dollar amounts to them.
I didn't see that listed under the traditional saying credits, but I know any high efficiency system usually will have some kind of tax credit. So the 9 cents per square foot annual reduction in utility cost, I mean, with Wisconsin's extremely cold winters, heat pumps generate heat from what's outside. It pulls the heat, whatever little heat is there and gives it to the system that's designated for. So that doesn't play in a factor for that does that play a factor for the 9% reduction
That 9
around this
cents-
area, this region?
So this is, I believe, this district is within about an hour and a half drive of here, I believe west of us, southwest of us. So it is that region. Part of going further in this study would be to do that conductivity test and pull more data locally here. You are correct, and that's that last one on there about ability to use grant dollars. Sometimes without the focus on energy credits or the IRA credits or rebates, putting in a system like this may not be the best investment
Yeah,
for us.
I just think with the $500,000 price tag and then there are 25 potentially thousand just up front to test it, and then the reliance on somebody outside of the district to be able to do the work, I think this is I don't think this would be a great option for the school.
And
in
just
my
to
opinion.
clarify, for your point, Mr. John, we do have some reliance on outside people, but we do have at least one HVAC person.
But, I mean,
This
that's
would be new for
standard,
us.
this is a
Yep.
specialty, not everybody does geothermal around here.
You are
Or
correct.
you're probably, paying a premium for someone to come from a different area, or just the sheer, limitations of who can do it.
Yep.
So you don't have everybody that can just do it. There's 100 different HVAC companies in the county. Geothermal, maybe a couple in the state. I mean,
It is much smaller than your traditional HVAC.
I think there are really strong financial arguments for this. The challenges, and I think it's similar to what John is saying, the challenges that I can come up with are, if we were to say, we want to put $100 million into this project, and I'm just saying that as a generally random number. But if we had an extra 10 million burning a hole in our pocket and we invested it in this, it is more than going to pay back for us. I think that'd be one thing. But what we're doing essentially, if we pick, and I'm again randomly picking a number, if we decide to invest it in these longer payback projects, which maybe makes sense over the long run, surprisingly, I'd say, well, yeah, but what are we giving up in the short term? As a result, instead of that $10 million, now we only have $90 million to spend, let's say, on educational spaces and such. And so I think over the long term, these make a lot of sense, but I'm not sure for the district it does based on how school finances work. And I think John's got a point. There's something to be said for the simplicity of an operation and keeping it just kind of straightforward. That, if a furnace fails, we probably, like John said, we can call someone within several miles. There's something to be said about that simplicity. My hope is that as we go forward, we're able to consider energy efficient options. I'm sure there are energy efficient boilers, and you said you were looking at that, LED and the windows, and so I wonder if we're just better off focusing on some of the more traditional high efficiency things rather than these. Again, if we had extra and unlimited dollars, I think this makes absolute sense. I just don't know that the sacrificing that additional money out of a referendum budget is really going to get us what we need on the whole, if that makes sense. Just my thoughts, but certainly others, please. Chris?
So I told the story to Jen quick when she had called me about this, and so my prior job, I ran a municipal complex of 5 buildings, right? And we looked into all of these options when I first got there. And they ended up settling on 2 things. One of them was the easy one, the focus on energy stuff, the LED lights. That was great. That was an easy win. I would strongly encourage you to, do that. But they also went the solar panel route. And I remember joking that these solar panels were going to get paid for when my youngest daughter at the time was 15. Well, she's going to be 6, and they still got 9 more years to make those solar panels pay off. So to that point, I think there's pros and cons here, that some of these are easy wins that I would strongly advocate for you to chase after, but the other ones, like the solar panels, maybe are not for us. Also, if we were running a school where we had some sort of educational program on solar panel installation, and we wanted to do it as kind of, a work kind of thing, that would be a different
Talking to
story.
the wrong guy. I know somebody who could probably
there you
create
go,
that, though I
yeah.
don't know we have enough for that.
Yeah, but
And I think you all put it eloquently. It's really about that return on investment. I mean, that's to that one bullet point of how long do you pay that return on investment. When we talk to our partners, there are some school districts who said, without these dollars from whatever grants, they're looking at 17 to 20 years to pay something back. And you're not guaranteed what level of grant, to John's question. And there is a lot of initial upfront cost for some of these. And so we're just looking for the guidance, because if you don't guide us in that direction, we're gonna redirect our work on some of the other pieces. And as Jen would know, there's plenty a lot to do with this right now to prep for our next meeting. And that's really what we're looking for.
so you said the geothermal is about 50 years. It lasts?
The bore field will, yes.
So every 50 years you got to replace it or update it, do something.
Yep.
What was the cost of the standard HVAC system?
I don't have a pricing on the whole HVAC system. They give me the premium of what it costs above and beyond. So if we were to add a ICE system to take care of air conditioning down at Jackson, you're looking at $550,000 to $600,000 to take care of your air conditioning needs over time. And that's really what they're looking for. And there you're reducing the cost of your electricity more than you potentially are just your gas at that point in time.
Over
or what
time,
you-
like as in the lifespan of the building?
Well, that's the initial, that $600,000 is the initial upfront cost to add that system above and beyond. So we would still look for the energy efficient boilers, all of those things, the windows, as you know, Mr. Zweiger talked about, all of those things. These are bigger ticket items up front that also have long-term dollars tied to them, and that's why we're looking for the guidance from the board versus saying this is one way or the other that we would go at that point.
How often do you anticipate needing to replace a standard HVAC system?
Well, I mean, some of ours at the high school and other buildings have been running for a long time. I think you're gonna hit pieces of it, right? You're gonna hit the boiler, but your duct work is not going to be there. I think that is some of the unknowns of some of these things, like a geothermal of their life cycle. That is a newer technology that is used in some of our larger buildings at that point. I think from us, when we talk internally, you know, this initial 25,000 to 30,000 up front, that's to find out if this even works or not. And so I think that's a, you know, that's a good chunk of change right now in what we're talking about. So you're only replacing components of that system as you go along, but you are adding to the complexity of it, and you're adding more equipment to it to be maintained in your budget in the long run also.
Other thoughts? Is our feedback sufficient guidance for you?
I believe so.
All right. Thank you. We appreciate you researching. Like I said, these are very, very compelling. And if we had a different financial structure, we were a business where you borrow money at 6% and you get 8% payback on something like this, it'd make a lot of sense. But unfortunately, I think the way that we're structured financially is a little bit different. But we appreciate the research nonetheless.
All right.
Thank
Well, then
you.
I'll go to the second part of the presentation tonight. So after the board meeting, board work session, last time, there was conversation and guidance around, within our initial $100 million, that rough $100 million project there is money for capital maintenance. The question came around above that point, and the board was talking about different numbers. And so the board had asked Jen and I with our partners to go back and really look at what our next steps are. So to just remind you, in terms of our long-term range capital maintenance plan, through that first chunk of capital maintenance, we are trying to take care of the big ticket items and those immediate items in the red, orange, and yellow. You look at the timeline of these potential projects, you're covering that time. We know either through a referendum and our capital maintenance, we may not touch all of them, so we've been prioritizing those even within those dollars. You can see the great areas out where we would defer costs for maintenance if those buildings were no longer online. And then you can see by year some of those costs. Obviously, East and West High School being the largest of them. Our goal being to try to take care of the red, orange, and yellow items, as many of those that we can, and items that are tough to sometimes schedule into our capital maintenance dollars here, bigger ticket items. So if you remember back to our community conversations, that was some ADA bathrooms, that was windows at buildings, and some variety of different things. It does not include dollars for any of those outside athletic facilities. We had a couple of community members asked me a couple of weeks ago again. We're trying to take care of those building pieces at this point in time. And so after listening to the board and going back and looking at what we could take off the plate, taking some of those smaller projects and building them back into our district capital maintenance plan, along with some prioritizing piece and really having a conversation specifically with EUA and Findorf about the high school, that idea of not touching spaces multiple times. I go in and I do something above the ceiling, and then I go in and do it again in 6 months and again in a year. In a room like this, eventually I'm wrecking 20 to 25% of the ceiling panels, the tiles, the grid, all of those types of things, and that efficiency when you open up a ceiling. So some of the things that you will see for the high school that we took off the current list is really starting to break up and replace heating ventilation units and areas within the high school. Their guidance, and we have done this as a district also, is you touch those types of things when you do mass demo at that space. So if the district office building were to move to the high school, you would take care of those touch spaces through that renovation and handle your HVAC needs. You would handle some heavy plumbing needs. The other thing we've taken off the list and will get incorporated in that project is what do we have to sprinkler for fire suppression and do we not? And so they're investigating some of those. So after hearing the board, really went back and came up with three kind of packages for the high school. Tried to package them, or sorry, two for the high school and then one for the elementaries. Tried to package them more as maintenance type items along with systems types of things that integrate into other things. So the first package, and you will see these items that were listed on those big lists last time, is some foundation repair work up at the high school, parking lot replacement for east and west lots and that driveway that connects them to the north side of that. That's approximately 315,000 square feet of asphalt that would have to be replaced and reworked. It would also be an opportunity, if we were doing that ESC project, to set that up for some changes in how traffic flow would happen up there and where people would park, because you would now have entrances potentially to the high school at the front of the building. So that could be looked at there. And then exterior window replacement. So to get into the energy efficiency piece at the high school and be able to control those windows and actually lock them and close them and deal with some of the leaking issues. That is package number one for the high school. And that comes in, and these are budgetary numbers, and they can fluctuate a little bit based upon the scope of the potential ESC moving to the high school project, is just above $3 million at $3.3 million. The second package is an internal systems package. It's really the bell system, the PA system, and the clock system. They continue to be more and more integrated to them. This package would cover the entire high school and the external PA system that goes with it, because we do have PA for emergency purposes outside. It is all new hardware. It is all new wiring. It's integration into our network and phone systems. So the old days of switches in the office and everything else to different rooms, that's all done digitally nowadays. It actually ties into our phone system, has some native pieces to that. Also has the ability to tie into our security system. So we have some preventative security measures here that if we hit certain things, we can have it automatically announce certain things, tie that into locking down some of the doors and all of those across the district, and the ability to integrate with our fire alarm system if the code requires it. Typically nowadays, in a fire panel upgrade and a fire system upgrade, you are in an annunciating fire system. So not only does it give you the glaring noise, but it also will then say fire, fire, exit the building. And so that could be tied in together to reduce costs of that project and use some of those same types of things. And this would cover all three floors, so basement, first, second floor of the high school, and replace all of that with all new wiring, equipment, and so forth, and to do all those integrations. Then at the elementary, similar package, just at a smaller scale, because you're talking 2 elementary buildings. Same concept, just less classrooms and square footage where things have to be worked into. Those systems nowadays, PA systems, bells, and clock systems, they typically integrate with each other and come together, so you can program them all through one function and have them tie and build off of each other. Right now, our old outdated system up at the high school, it doesn't always automatically update time. So when we go through daylight savings, you see anywhere from 20 to 40 tickets that come through to adjust clocks and so forth with that. That takes some of those things, and then also allows us to go to a digital bell program with a lot more options than what you would see if you went up to the high school nowadays. So those are kind of the 3 big pieces in terms of what that would offer and kind of our priority pieces that could be above and beyond. Looking for some guidance, looking for questions, or anything else you would like us to finalize before we come back for the July 22nd meeting.
Well, I have asked before, I know we're probably not at that stage yet, but for the whole project, I'm still looking for a itemized deduction or an itemized list of what things are gonna cost along for every piece that we're gonna be doing. Because how do we know that these are the next priority items if we completely are missing something for safety and security, or readjusting how the high school's set up to bring maybe the officers down on the main level where all the fights are? If we're gonna be changing some of that in the other pieces, I don't have any clue yet, because I haven't seen an itemized list yet.
And so to your point, Mr. Donaldson, we go back to this beginning, because it's conceptual till we get to a certain point. There are things, the conversation about what the office space would look at the high school, that entrance you would see in a new design. So if you go into Badger, the SRO is much closer to the front office. You would see that in a high school design nowadays. These are really items that are off of the capital maintenance, not necessarily larger renovation pieces. As we bring forth the plan for the ESC fitting into the high school, you will see some of that reconfiguration of offices, secure entrances, some of those things, and that would probably follow a long line with that project, not necessarily the capital maintenance pieces at that point in time.
John, I don't mean to speak for you, but are you looking for like a 5-10 year CIP list of all of the things? And these are the ones that boil
I
up?
want to know where the district thinks they're going to spend all this money if we're doing, we're going to be doing a giant referendum. When Badger was done, my opinion, I think money was wasted on whatever light show that they have in the library. They put some kind of light display in the complete waste of taxpayers' dollars. I want nothing to do with that going into the schools. I want everything to be functional and where, what's needed for the students, what's needed for the teachers, what's needed for a good education system and building for everyone to be able to be efficient, move through the building, have heating, cooling. The high school still has, as of recent, I know there's still issues with, you got painting stuff and you got, HVAC issues that you're always talking about. Are all those included in the current referendum stuff that we're talking? So that would seem like a bigger priority than
They are. We
some
can certainly-
nice haves.
We could certainly, I look at some of those things as safety and security. I think that the things you're talking about, like going to HVAC, we're talking about redoing majority of the high school and some heavy reno. So in the $10, what you're talking about there, we're trying to fit into that dollar amount that we already talked about at that point in time.
Because $3 million is nothing, no small number.
I don't disagree with you.
We're a rather large portion of the $100 million plus, that's a big number.
Yep.
That can go a lot further than maybe a couple bumpy parking spots. I'm just saying, that doesn't seem like the highest priority to me when we have other things like HVAC efficiencies. I don't disagree, the windows probably could be replaced if they're super old, because, they're probably old plate glass, they're probably not really efficient, who knows what's in there right now? I have no idea, but they're probably not even safe. So I just think some of these are, the clocks and stuff, that seems like a huge number. I would love to see the actual breakdown of how much each of those cost, because that seems astronomical to me. I don't know, maybe that's really the cost, but I hope we would have done some shopping around to what other companies offer this. It just seems crazy.
Yep,
$3
and I think
million
to some
for
of those
one school.
pricings, I see some of those pricings, Jen does, we feel the same way. Findorf is using those off of current projects that they have, and that's where they're getting their pricing from. Things like parking lots, those are big ticket items, that's a lot of
And then
pavement
what's
to replace.
Findorf's upcharge for that stuff?
I
Because at this point, is this really part of the contract that we might be eventually signing if we do, pass a referendum? Is this part of it? Probably not. We can probably outsource to somebody else if we want to shop around. That doesn't seem like it has to be part of it.
If we would choose to not do it outside of a referendum, yes, then we would go through our normal capital maintenance project, and certainly we could take the parking lots off or whatever else. That's why we're here looking for guidance on where to go with each package at that point in time.
You still, even through all of that, you still go through a bid process, you still
Yep.
look at all those things. But I think what you're saying is you're more ready than not for more detail, right? We're saying we're dealing with the big numbers, but in that next conversation, don't be afraid to give you the nth level of details so that you can create the intersection of it's a high priority, it's connected to safety, which is a board and community priority, and it fits into these big dollars, right? So we're trying to get those fence posts of dollars, right? Because we walked away with, show us something maybe between 100 and 110. So we put together something that shows you, what was it, 7 million?
Little over 7 million,
$8
yep.
million here in kind of the next layers that were in the red, orange, or maybe yellow, integrated and connected to safety, which are the priorities. So and again, to John's point, they're really big ideas right now. If you want to say, proceed with that at this, then we can start shaping and molding those details for that next conversation. To that point, before you're asked to set a final question amount, that you feel comfortable with the level of detail that's there at the time, knowing that we have to get to approval, and there's a fair amount of design that comes after any kind of approval to. But again, narrowing it to more detail so that you're feeling comfortable with going beyond a number or setting that final point. So that's good feedback for the team.
And I don't disagree with the clocks. I mean, if you're getting that many tickets to do that, that's an ongoing savings after we get them reintegrated to a new system and updates automatically that you don't have to fix and your team doesn't have to do. So there is benefits to that. I see that. And I mean, what is the cost? You know, what's the benefit of what we're gonna be saving each year, of how many tickets you're handling, time, you know, people, that's all stuff that I would love to know. Like, how much are you charging, or is it essentially costing the district to go and fix a clock? $10, $15 each person
It's
that gets
labor
a
time.
ticket?
And for us,
Times
it's-
however many, maybe twice a year we do this?
Yeah.
I mean,
Not just
that's-
that as part of the story, to your point, John, but how this is really around safety and security and its integration with the other systems. The clocks just come with that.
They come with that.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
bells and the PAs and the tie and the fact that we have classroom where the PAs don't always work, and that is a safety and security. You know, prior to an integration we did at a couple other elementary schools where we tied in our phone system, your PA was the phone speaker, which you couldn't hear in a classroom.
And I'm sure the audible words are probably part of a disability compliance thing at this
Charlie,
point.
the
It's a
Charlie
code.
Brown
Yeah.
announcements?
It's a code. So if you're up in our, the only building I that know of that we have it is our addition on the auditorium. When we redid that project, if you're up there during a fire drill, it has it. That is now the new code piece, which doing some of this integration, we already have in that first 20 million, the fire panels, which we know are outdated, and all of that can all be tied at the same time.
So I think then part of that, to John's point, and for the board and for the community, when we have to tell that story, for us, just that reminder alongside, because I've lived in districts and certainly we're in one now, how outdated these systems are. You can't get parts, you can't maintain. If I have that system fail, it's a critical system failure. And how to do that. And to your point, John, we're not telling that story very well then. So we've got to connect those dots for
Because at that,
everyone.
I mean, just with that alone, I would say then that's a higher priority than the number one package of repairing because that can be done at anybody. Anybody can bring asphalt in and redo it. I mean, if those systems are sold that we can't even get parts for them to fix it, and if it does go down, I mean, that's gonna be probably an emergency board meeting to, hey, give us a bunch of money there because we have to replace this right now.
Yeah.
So.
And I think the other piece that goes with this is we kept certain things on our cycle. So things out of capital, like our roofing, we didn't put a single dollar of roofing into any of our capital maintenance projects. We want to keep those types of things on a cycle because otherwise you do too much of it right away and then that comes back to bite you in the future. So there are things we're still doing out of our capital maintenance. Some of those projects are big ticket dollars, which would be hard for us to fund and still do our roofs and some of those other things and do a parking lot in the same year.
So
That parking lot could eat up majority of our capital maintenance at
I
that
think
point.
for us, from the board, is the question was, if you were to start looking over that 100, here would be some next kind of big things. We're taking away a lot of feedback to help refine. But the question we needed answered was, should we put a toe over that line, given the things that are connected to safety and security and those pieces, or should we hold? We need to know so that we can figure out where to direct our efforts and energy in advance of the 22nd.
So my thought is, and I know we gave you this challenge as well, to come up with what would those next items be and come up with kind of the compelling story. The idea of safety and security, I think, is important. The other that you alluded to before, which I think is something we also need to talk about, is if we were to say no to these, and if we're going to have to do it 4 years down the road, and it's going to be, making this up, 20% more because we have to tear out the ceilings, that's important to know as well. And for instance, the parking lot replacement, I mean, I agree with John sometimes, well, that seems like you could do that at any time, although I also understand maybe we're changing traffic flows. Maybe the whole idea of heavy construction we know is going to wreck the parking lot. I think kind of the stories behind that, I hear elements of that. I mean, I view this as, I think it's worthy for further exploration because I can see the idea of saving money in the long run around things that likely we're going to have to do. I mean, foundation repair sounds like something we probably should have done already, and probably something that likely could be worse over time. So, I mean, I think it meets those criteria for certain inclusion. We're not making decisions tonight, but I think it's compelling enough for us to ask you to research it more.
Okay.
Other thoughts?
Is the foundation repair due to this side or the poor drainage of the current parking
So
lot?
there's two spots at the high school. One of it's poor drainage, the other is a spot that we would investigate further, but also could have some dollars from the space where the ESC is going into the high school. So you use two pots to solve the problem at the end. As we look into that, I know Dave Rawson had a contractor in and do some beefing ups of some structural work near one of our towers at the front of that. These are items, if we go back to this one right here, these are big ticket items that have been scored out and placed in those first three columns that we're really looking forward to. When you match them up with what we currently do out of our capital maintenance, we wouldn't be able to get to many of these items. And that's really where we look at, but we would have to do the foundation piece first at that point in time as we look to potentially change an opening in the building or something like that at the high
Yeah,
school.
but is it digging up the driveway to get to the foundation?
No,
It's a
this would
different
not.
section?
One would be a driveway in the back, one would be in the front, depending upon what we have to do. That's the other part of it.
So potentially, because I don't disagree, a foundation thing kind of is a, you let it go, it doesn't get any better.
Yep.
Is there a path to do a combination of some of these packages?
We could certainly repackage them. If you, for example, if you said, you know what, let me take this one. We'd like to see exterior window replacement and foundation repair. We can certainly come back with that. Typically, we're gonna do all the windows versus half. There's the scale of economy, there's, the number of windows, the labor pieces of coming on site one time, the energy efficiencies. We can repackage these a little bit, if you so want to. We could even take one of the two parking lots out. Those parking lots are not cheap. That's a lot of square footage for asphalt by the time you redo it all nowadays and meet new design standards and all those types of things. We can look at other options. These are the next big ticket items in those columns that if we don't do, we will then work with our team here and through our capital maintenance budget to figure out at that point in time. Some of them match with some of the projects we're already doing at the high school or fit well together, like some of those safety security pieces.
Tim, I have a question. In the year 2025, 2026, there's a jump from 15 million in 2024 to 46 million for the East West High School. What is that? What are those big ticket items? Because those don't show up on your list of big ticket items.
So a lot of that is your bigger ticket items, your ADA, your locker rooms, which we have not touched, continued stuff for the outside for athletics. When you talk about the athletic side, all of that. The stadium, those are in the first two columns, the track, a lot of different bigger pieces, but when you get into the HVAC, we went through a 3-hour session with our maintenance team here and some of the guys at Findorf of, do we start to try to chunk up the high school and solve some of these HVAC problems? So if you go into the library up at the high school, when that was redone, it was done ceiling to floor with all the mechanicals at that point. That's where we're gonna get our best return on investment, not coming in and doing HVAC here or there, because then we might as well put new lights in, we might as well put new ceilings and grids in, then we're gonna have painting work and all of that. That's where you see a lot of those mechanical things start to balloon pretty fast.
Other thoughts, questions? If we've given you sufficient feedback, I think it sounds like there are ones on here that are worthy. Again, we're not making a decision, but are worthy of further exploration. I think ultimately, Superintendent Wimmer, you're right. We're going to need to kind of go through, maybe not down to each individual ceiling tile level, but we're going to need to understand.
Yeah, somewhere in the middle. And I think the other piece is just, I think sometimes we forget was in the first, even I today doing something, had to go back to that first chunk of capital maintenance, making that alignment to see how some of these projects could go hand in hand. But we can certainly bring some of that back for the next meeting.
Thank you again for the
Thank you very
research on
much.
this item.
I appreciate it.
All right, we move now to, we have a few action items on our agenda tonight. And the first is the annual parental notice of standards. And Dr. Quinn Trueblood is going to be joining us at the podium, our Director of Curriculum and Instruction. We appreciate you being here tonight. Good evening.
Good evening. Yes, this is the annual notice to parents, and as former board members, you know that this is something that we really are proud to announce and share with our parents and guardians for students in our resident district, that we want to not only tell them what it is that our standards are, which really represent what students should know and be able to do, but this is what we would guarantee this coming school year, 2024-25. I would like to let you know that none of the academic standards have any changes from the current year. That's important because if there were changes, I would ask for a discussion and to ask the board for a full adoption of any changes, but there isn't one tonight. There are some changes to the format. There are 18 content areas for which our comprehensive program covers, and I just wanted to itemize for full disclosure that there were 3 format or what I call technical changes in the standards that would be published for the upcoming school year. So that would be found in the science standards, and that is simply a format change from the prior year. There is performance indicator changes that are showing up in grade bands. So instead of showing grade bands for indicators, what they did for the business and information technology standards is that they reformulated those indicators into a progression of beginner, intermediate, and advanced performance. And then lastly, there is some format changes in the special education, in the ELA, English Language Arts, Essential Elements Standards. And what they did there was call to attention in the reformatting reading and foundational skills, which is really, really significant under the Act 20 law. So the only thing that I have detected there is that they're displaying the standards to make it more readable for the user, which is usually the teacher, across grade bands, across one grade in grades kindergarten through 2nd, and then another page that walks the grade bands through 3rd and 5th grade. And that's actually very helpful. And that concludes all the changes for the standards.
Thank you. And just as a matter of history, when I look down the list, many of them say Wisconsin standards for health sciences or Wisconsin standards for family and consumer sciences. So is that something that DPI helps with, or what's the source for those?
Yes, the source is DPI is actually the certifying agent, if you will, and they manage all of the standards development, and they amass an entire collection of experts and broad content representatives to work on them, and it's really quite a substantial initiative. And so that's why you will not see standards being changed very often, and if not in decades' time, depending on the current milieu of the time. If there's something that has to be changed, then it usually calls to attention, mobilizing a stakeholder group to work on the standards. So yes, you will see that it is usually Wisconsin academic standards, and it's always developed through a protocol that is managed by the Department of Public Instruction.
Other questions? I thought maybe you were raising your hand, Kelly, sorry. All right. All right, board members, this is an action item. Any final questions on this for Dr. Trueblood? Hearing none, I'd move to approve the annual parental notice of standards as presented. Is there a second? Thank you, Melanie. We have a motion and second to approve the annual parental notice of standards as presented. Any final discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. We appreciate it. We'll move then to the next agenda item, and I believe you'll be helping us with that also, Dr. Trueblood, which is our K-4 English Language Arts Primary Resource Amplify Core Knowledge Language Arts Contract. That's a mouthful. There are abbreviations here, right? It's actually the ELA, CKLA contract. That's a little bit easier to say. This is something that we've seen before. I know that we had some questions. Is this with regard to resources, if I remember right? Why don't you walk us through this? I think we had a preview of this, if I remember right.
Yes, so at the prior board meeting on May 20th, the board did see a presentation on the entire resource adoption process for this and the vetting process, and it did come through the curriculum committee on recommendation of the district. And so all those steps were taken, and the board adopted that primary resource. And so what I have before you tonight is really the contract itself. And it's quite significant because what we have is a real need to assure a due diligence around several elements that really make this a sizable undertaking. So we have to complete a data agreement, which is really protect students and families. and the district. We also want to make sure that we scrutinize contracts and review them so that we protect ourselves and have the best value and the best service possible. We have to do a pricing analysis, and then lastly, we want to make sure that we're talking with our like districts so that we can fully understand. Some of these districts have already done the adoption, have already purchased as early as 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago. So we wanted to make sure that we understood the totality of this part of the contract, because what happens if the board should take action tonight, we would make sure that we have something that is guaranteed for students and for teachers in what I would propose to be a 6-year agreement. And what you have before you is really an analysis, maybe a large grand overview, if you will, of what it would cost and the components of that contract over a 1-year agreement versus a 3-year agreement versus a 6-year. And I'm sure it's going to be very easy to distill that there is a large advantage for the 6-year agreement simply because this was a seismic event in the history of Wisconsin. And so we don't anticipate that something dramatic would happen that we'd lose any value on this material whatsoever. So, so you can see that there are a few things that I just wanted to be sure that not only are there major components, but I know the board brought up maybe some questions about what shipping and handling would look like, so we definitely bore into that. And it is very clear, I have pictures of the totality of the volume of what a classroom kit looks like, and what those, I mean, we have snapshots from our colleagues in the classrooms, and the weight and the volume is quite sizable. We do have about 1,750 students that we serve in that age band, and we have all those teachers and all the interventionists and programs, special ed programs, English learner programs, everybody who may need this resource. So I wanted to just describe to you that in our analysis, and Tim Harder has been the best partner here, should we take that load on ourselves? Direct deposit at the school would really be a sizable effort from our district. And so to have a total exposure or cost of, say, $43,000 right now for a 6-year contract, which means that they would deliver materials to us without any addition, at a flat rate, no matter what we needed in that 6 years, we did exercise what would it take for us to actually get all the materials, whether it's there or here, and really disseminate them in their proper locations, and also have the people power to move them into the classrooms. It's really quite a sizable undertaking. And so, and with gas prices fluctuating, et cetera, we do think that is in the best interest for the district to really understand and appreciate what it requires to ship and handle these materials on site to the teachers. I did, in good faith, said, hey, our board is kind of really looking at this, so they unilaterally just said, we would like to give you a 15% discount. And that, I think, is actually a very fair rate for discount. I asked other districts too, and what happened earlier, and not in this year, is that sometimes the discounts were captured in other elements. You can see here in this contract, the discounts are actually sizable because they're discounting licenses, which really have to be renewed every year. And if you look at the amount of, the total amount, let's just say in the 6-year proposal here, it's a little over $300,000 over the course of 6 years for teacher and student licenses. That's a sizable discount relative to, say, where New Berlin did theirs, and they had a discount on shipping and handling, but they didn't have a discount on the licensing. So that was just a different time, different environment, different competition. So this company is getting a lot of bids for sure, but they're also understanding the market they're in, and so we did some comparison with other companies, and they are kind of like competitive in almost every element of their package. So I can confirm that with you. One of the things that I think is really important, and Andrew Sarnow has actually been working with me on this, is that because it's upfront full payment, and that's really been the standard payment protocol right now. It is unusual, but we are in unusual times. And so for the discount that is being offered and the short-term 1 or 2 borrowing times that we may have to implement to pay for this will offset the discounts that are being issued right now. So I think Andy could speak to it more clearly, but bottom line, we have to do some short-term borrowing, not much to get through, but that will have to be worked into next year's budget.
So,
John?
yeah, so you said delivery, or you alluded to delivery included them
Yeah.
dispersing the material to the appropriate classrooms. So that's part of the deal?
Well, what typically happens is it gets on site, goes through a loading dock, it has to get to a room, and then teachers would come and get their things. So those couple steps there become very challenging when you have bulk like that. So that's one-time bulk. And also, they would, let's just say they bring it here to the ESC as a scenario. We would then have to itemize all those items ourselves because they wouldn't do that work for us. They'd bring them all here. We'd have to, tag each school, how many students. Some schools have 368 students, some schools have 307. I mean, it's all it gets kind of complicated pretty quickly unless you are supercharged on it and you have a whole team that does that regularly.
Other questions?
I guess the short-term borrowing, I guess I would like to know more about that. And he's walking up already.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Gwen. Every year, and I disclose this information when we have our annual information, right at the top of all of our reports, when I have the revenues and expenditures by fund, when we have that cumulative amount of $110 million in our budget, I always talk about that activity to date. And there are periods in time throughout the year when expenditures exceed revenues. And that's one of the reasons why fund balance or fund equity is an important piece to have with our board policy that we have, where it says 14 to 18% of unassigned. Number one, for emergency purposes. Number two, for cash flow purposes. So over the last several years, we've been able to utilize the dollars available that have been levied for debt payment. They've been an interest-bearing account, but they've helped our fund balance within the fund, but they've also helped with our cash flow. So they've allowed us the opportunity to not short-term borrow for about 5 years now. That amount is depleting, and we need to monitor that. In fact, we're looking at 2 different methods right now to understand our future cash flow needs. And if we will need to short-term borrow, this outlay of capital doesn't help. That being said, what Dr. Trueblood shared is, this is how this company is operating. There's huge discounts that are granted. If you make that prepayment, I think I've contacted about 10 different districts now. I'm up, even a few more that I've heard since it was last reported. Everybody has made that outlay.
Yeah, but just because everybody else is doing it doesn't mean we can't negotiate a better term. There's no way to get them to a 2-year payment deal or something, so we don't have to do the short term. I just don't like the fact that we're about to ask the community for $100 million and we're about to we have to borrow more from somewhere else.
Yeah, so we've done an analysis on the 1 year, 3 year, and the full 6 year. In the 1 year is approximately $700,000 if it's okay to round. We would be paying well in excess of over $1 million if you look at doing a year by year, 1 year at a time, the first 3 years, and then adding a second half to that to get to the 6 years. So we've done that analysis, and with interest rates, and again, very short periods of time that we need to cash flow when expenditures exceed the revenues. So we'd be well in it, and we're probably going to need to do that to begin with.
I was going to say, I think the
This is-
confusing
they're-
part is coupling these 2 things together, and they don't go together.
Right.
That's
But I thought
one
we
piece
had
of the
money,
puzzle.
I thought we
Yeah.
had money set aside for this to some extent.
Yep, so we known about this law, we've had that, it's worked into the budget, but Andy's overall budget is getting to that point where we do that. This is not the one tipping point.
No.
This is just adding to that, so I think us commingling those it's unfair. Now,
So
we
you're
will
saying
get to that point. Yeah.
Not doing this wouldn't change the fact that we're going to
Correct.
short-term borrow? Okay,
Correct.
that
So
makes
it's,
sense.
that's just a false coupling of that. It's a piece of that puzzle, but it's not there. So also recall, we're mandated to do this. There's a promise of making dollars available, but you see us not factoring in any of that. I'll believe a return from the state on this when I see it as a check. So hopefully we'll get dollars back on the purchase that we're being required to make, but
Okay.
again, I'm not going to budget for it till I see it in there, so thanks.
Well put. Thank you.
Yes, remember the state said that we possibly could get up to 50% reimbursement, but we do know that that's a very small potential, given the totality of the states and how they're structuring that reimbursement and ranking districts by size. So that's fair, and that's the right thing to do, but so we would expect not to have the full 50 for sure, and for sure, maybe not have any. We don't know yet, but we're in the range of being conservative and saying that we probably won't see return dollars on that. I think that actually concludes my overview of this particular contract.
Great, well, thank you for the overview and for entertaining the questions so far.
Sorry,
What-
I have one question.
I was just, what other questions do we have? Dr. Temez?
Excuse me. I'm looking at the layout for the 1, 3, and 6-year cost on this. And, I mean, obviously, the biggest expense is just in the initial outlay, because it's not really like it's $393,000 a year, and then you would multiply that by 6 years, and that would be your cost. It looks like there's about a $60,000 savings, and it's all in the student consumables part of it. Because everything else, the cost stays fixed, whether it's 1 year or 6 years. And that's not per year, that's for the whole time, according to how this is laid out. So the student consumables is saving us about 60,000 by doing the 6-year plan, and then the shipping then goes up. I can't imagine it would have been 24,000 a year for 6 years, because
The bulk of it is in the first year.
yeah, it's got to be, because there's not much, and nothing else changes. So it's not like they have a bunch of stuff they ship out every year, because most of it is, the cost is the same, whether it's 1 year or 6 years. So I don't know what they're sending out other than the consumables. So I mean, I think that, I think it's important just to look at, it looks like it would be a no-brainer to do the 6-year plan. And I actually do think that's still the smart way to do it. But it's not quite as dramatic savings as it might look if you're like, oh, well, 1 year is 400,000 and then, 6 years is only 680. That's the way to go. It wouldn't cost the school district 400,000 per year, every year for 6 years.
Your calculation is correct.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, that's a great point. I interpreted it as the classroom kits are something that's a bit more permanent. And I remember in the dark ages when I went to school, there were some resources that maybe the classroom shared or borrowed, but it was kept there. And then there were consumables like workbooks maybe that I would draw on. Is that the similar concept to this? Is that what's?
So students should have their learning materials available to them all the time. And then there's things that would be built into the classroom. That's really what you have, that's what I consider to be the classroom kits. You have all the resources for the students that they need, and then they can take things home with them. That's issued to them. But the consumables are what they actually work on and do not get turned back in. It's theirs. So yes, I think we're describing the same thing.
I think we're describing the same thing. Kelly?
I have a question on timeline. As we all know, summer is flying past already. And if we make this decision and everything passes, what is their promised delivery date? Just to make sure that it's in everyone's hands in time for the school year to start.
Yes, and so that's why this actually came to you prior to discussion, because we are under the gun, if you will, to meet a very specific timeline. It's very important for us to meet that because we want to make sure that the teachers have it in hand and are ready and prepared to implement with very strong guidance and support. And so that's what we have teed up. And so this is how it actually works, pending the board's action. The POs are all set to go. So we would execute that right away. And then it would take 2 to 3 weeks, and we did confirm with them, is that a real timeline? Like, we have to know if this is just right now and something's gonna happen tomorrow, or it's gonna be 9 weeks. So we really vetted that very carefully with multiple people in the company and also in other districts. And it is, we're gonna say 4 weeks, and if we get 4 weeks, and we should be able to have them on site in the classrooms, ready for teachers to use. So the decision tonight will allow us to stay on that timeline.
Board members, other questions?
Just, I mean, that's enough time for the teachers to learn the new material and stuff, though?
No, so what happens is there is the literacy specialist, so there's a 3-year implementation plan, and that's really done through a special team, the team that went before the curriculum committee also and before you. And so there is a pacing guide that's being developed. And what we're doing is we're actually taking prior districts' implementation plans and really reviewing them and adopting them for our community, for our learning community. So there is a pacing guide. There's 18 months of professional development that is already teed up with the Amplify team that walks with our teachers through the progression this year using the resource. There's coaching cycles that are embedded into this with all our teachers. So it isn't like you have to know everything the first day, but you will get the essentials, and that is the craft of the teacher. If you give them the information, the pacing guide, the structure for which the resource is intended to use, align with the standards, that is their work, that is their craft. And so we're very confident that this pacing guide will basically set the map forward and all the touch points that the team has to make sure our teachers are ready, set, go, and confident. That's what we have before us.
I mean, are we gonna make this accessible to them if they wanted it early, though, to start reviewing anything?
The very best way we can.
Okay.
But we have to get the materials here. And one of the wonderful worries and anxieties is our teachers want to have it right now and they want to look into it. But one of the wonderful things about doing things together is that we will be able to learn with each other throughout the whole process, be a true collaborative community around this first year. And learn from each other and learn how to use the resource and learn what it is to really teach in a very different way using the science of reading, sorry. So there is a fair bit of, oh my goodness, we're kind of like ramping up, and other districts have done this, and so we are actually taking a few pages from them who have been successful.
And is there as soon as the contract's signed, if it passes tonight, is there a downloadable book that they can review starting early if they wanted to?
I can't confirm that with you right now. That might
save us 4 weeks of study also.
Yeah. So what we think, what other districts have told us is it's been very much guidance that people work together in their teams doing this together, not unilateral studies, simply because it's very hard to do by yourself. So could they do it? I'm not sure. I certainly can look in to see if they can get a print of it. But I think there's a real team effort here, and I think that the people, the staff are anticipating that they will be doing this together. So I know that there are staff out there who want the stuff, and so we know who they are, and so if we can get that to them as soon as we can, I think that would be absolutely a wonderful thing to do. So that's a soft yes.
Other questions? All right, hearing none, I'll move this for consideration then. I would move, wrong one. I would move to approve the contract for the purchase of the CKLA materials. Is there a second? Second, June, thank you. Motion and second to approve the contract for the purchase of the CKLA materials. Any final discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, that motion carries. We appreciate your work and your presentation. Thank you, Dr. Triplett. We move then to our next action item, which is our 2023-2024 budget amendment. I believe we had a preview of that last time, and so I think Mr. Sarno is here to answer questions if we have any. Superintendent Wimmer, maybe confirm, were there any changes to the
No
presentation?
changes, yep, no changes and no interim questions. So unless there's any more tonight, we'd be looking for action on that.
Great. Board members, any questions based on the presentation last time or the materials presented today? Hearing none, I'll move this for consideration by making a motion to approve the 2023-2024 budget amendment as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
I think that was Mr. Jenkins, correct? Thank you. Motion and second to approve the 23-24 budget amendment as presented. Any final discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion also carries. Thank you. Superintendent Wimmer, we move to policies for second reading, and we got a preview of these last time.
You've seen these before. The board can take action on a second reading if it's unanimous. So you can choose to take those individually. There were no questions, no changes. One is a revision to school attendance area, just generalizing the language. And then we did some substantial cleanup on animals in the classroom, as well as accompanying AR with that. And then we had a new policy for consideration on volunteers.
Board members, any questions on these policies? Again, this is a second reading. We saw these before. I'm hearing no questions, so I'm going to just boldly attempt a motion on this, and we'll see if it gets unanimous approval. I'd move to approve policies 432, 453.9, and 353.1 as recommended. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconds all around. Let's see. Chad, we're going to give this one to you. We have a motion and a second to approve policies 432, 453.9, and 353.1 as recommended. Any final discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? That motion carries unanimously, and we will consider those approved. Thank you. We move then to future agenda items. We start with our board meeting calendar, and I can announce some upcoming meetings. It looks like these all are going to take place in the Education Service Center. July 16, Curriculum Committee meeting at 4:30. July 22, we have a board work session. Superintendent Wimmer, I think you would foreshadow that, 5:30 p.m. August 6, Policy Committee meeting, 4 p.m. August 12th, board meeting, 5:30 p.m. August 20, Curriculum Committee at 4:30. And a board meeting on August 26, 5:30 p.m. Again, all at the Education Service Center. I believe that's all the items. And we encourage members of the public to check for the official meeting notices in case any of these change. Anything to add on the board meeting calendar? We move then to items for follow-up and communication. Any other items for follow-up or communication? All right, hearing none, we've moved really to the end of our planned agenda. There is an item that is appropriate for us to discuss in executive session. So I will make a motion to adjourn into executive session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851C to consider employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and take any such action if necessary based on its discussion, namely compensation. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Donaldson, correct? Yep. Thank you. Motion and second to adjourn into executive session. Any final discussion? This requires a roll call vote, so I will change to my roll call sheet. And I will call the roll. Dr. Temez? Yes. Mr. Donaldson? Yes. Ms. Lang?
Yes.
Ms. Kruger? Yes. Ms. Aragot? Yes. Mr. Swigert votes yes. And Mr. Jenkins?
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously. We are adjourned into executive session. Thank you to everyone for attending and watching. Have a good evening.